All right, let's get into our first discussion for the day now. In November last year, the World Bank's Ease of Doing Business report for 2018 was released, and it showed that Nigeria jumped 24 places in Ease of Doing Business Index.
Yes, indeed. Now, that report placed Nigeria in the 145th position. That's 24 positions better than the 169th position the nation was ranked in the 2017 report. Now, that feat was celebrated by many, especially the presidency, who saw it as a validation that the economic policies put in place by the government was yielding good results.
Now, the ranking was based on 10 sub-indices, which include starting a business, dealing with construction permits, getting electricity, and getting credit. Now, going by those indices, some persons are of the view that Nigeria is yet to get it right. Now, most of those sub-indices used by the World Bank are still begging for government attention in the country.
Now, some economic watchers have also identified delay in trademark registration, multiple taxation as setbacks in doing business in the country. All right, we're joined now by Technical Assistant, Industry, Trade and Investment, Akin Olusoji Akinyele. Good morning and thanks for joining us on the show.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the fundamental question is, I mean, what difference really does it make that Nigeria seems to be doing much better on the Ease of Doing Business rating or ranking to the grassroots? The Minister for Trade and Investments only recently said it has not penetrated. I mean, talking about the grassroots, has it even penetrated the urban, centers? How much more the grassroots?
Okay. Thank you very much, Ngozi. I think it's important to place things in perspective. The first thing is that the Ease of Doing Business project, in terms of the reforms of the federal government, are focused towards small and medium-scale enterprises. Now, there are a lot of other interventions of the government, for instance, that go into the micro, which is like the MSME clinics. You have others in, the social investment programs and things like that. But the Ease of Doing Business program has adopted the methodology of the World Bank in focusing on small and medium-scale enterprises, basically to improve, public service delivery and make sure that Nigeria, in terms of removing, critical bottlenecks that either hinder business or allow Nigeria to be an easier place in which to do business. And so, I mean, for instance, 2017 was a very productive year. No doubt, we've moved 24 places up. And the World Bank actually acknowledged us as one of the most 10 most improved economies in the world in terms of reform initiatives that have gone on. So it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. We're increasingly seeing impact. And as we go on into 2018, and I'll just speak briefly about that, we're basically replicating the model that was adopted in 2017 to achieve the results that we've seen. For instance, in 2017, we had a series of accelerated intervention programs over 60 days. So we had the first 60-day National Action Plan in February, about this time last year. And then shortly after that, we had His Excellency the Vice President, as acting president then, issue an executive order, 3 executive orders, but one of them pertaining to the Ease of Doing Business reforms in terms of the transparency in public service, efficiency and effectiveness. Now, the implementation of those 2, if you like, programs is what led to the World Bank acknowledging us as, improved by 24 places up and one of the 10 most improved economies in the world. So, and all of that has to do with a lot of collaboration, with ministries, with departments, with agencies. At our last count, we were working with, within that time, about 44 MDAs at the federal level. And collaboration with the National Assembly, we passed 2 bills within a 90-day period, unprecedented. And that led to the Getting Credit indicator, where we're ranked, as the 6th in the world in terms of ranking. Now, again, you say, how does that lead to, getting... So I'm preempting the question and saying that. But the point here is that the legal framework has been set in place such that it is now, it's now the burden of the banks and the financial institutions to use this legal framework in order to lend to SMEs who are now less riskier in terms of, there's a national collateral registry where movable assets can now be used as opposed to just landed property for collateral to lend to the SMEs. Exactly.
Okay, that's an interesting angle.
Right. So there's a credit, the Credit Bureau Bill, which actually allows you now to have credit ratings, credit scores for SMEs, and that way, apart from just using your normal risk profiling to lend to them, you actually have their credit history on which they can either be less riskier to lend to or high exactly.
High risk.
Okay.
So it's this combination of reforms that are gradually sifting into the economy, and we're beginning to see progress.
Okay. So since that time last year up until now, about how many more SMEs or new businesses have come upstream for one to say, wow, because of this reform or this policy in place, we have been able to establish more businesses. This was based on percentage or based on number?
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of that data is out there, and I mean, you can get them from different sources, the National Bureau of Statistics, the CAC, Corporate Affairs Commission. But I'll just give you a few. For instance, and this is a reform that has been done, just in the starting a business indicator, you can actually now, from the comfort of your room, register, name search for a business and register your business name online through the CAC portal. And we found out that just by implementing that reform, about 4 times the number of online registrations, or if you like, online activity on the CAC portal went in immediately after implementing that reform. In terms of the getting credit, before now, the National Collateral Registry, just very few financial institutions were registered on that collateral registry. But now we have seen an increase, especially in the microfinance banks. About 127 of them are now registered on the National Collateral Registry using, registering movable assets of SMEs that they may have lended to or are, approaching them for loans.
So what you're saying, in other words, if I want to start a business right now, let's assume I'm in my room right now, and I am actually, how long will it take me to, confirm the business name first, which is, what you have to do? How long would it take?
Okay.
And of course, to actually register that business name.
Okay. So if
compared to what it used to be before.
Compared to what it used to be before, it could be, what it used to be before could be any length of time.
Yeah.
Number one, because you had to go to a physical CAC office to start that process, have a lawyer beside you, do this, do that. But right now, from the comfort of your room, you can go on the CAC portal, provided you have all the requirements that are to upload on that portal.
Assuming I have all the requirements.
Assuming you have that, it will not take you more than 48 hours.
Really?
Yes. And the beauty of this is that we keep saying that,
Before in Nigeria, it could take over a month.
Oh, yes, I know that. I also was an entrepreneur, even so I know how long it could take. I mean, it was one of the most, one of the proudest moments we had was when we were coming out of a CAC office and we had the security guard right there at the CAC office telling a walk-in customer in Pidgin, "Oh, guy, we know they do manual registration here again. Go and do it online." I mean, that was impressive. It just tells you how, the information has actually gone.
Well, speaking of that, that's, of course, a function of the use of technology.
Yes.
The same Minister for Trade and Industries said recently that for ease of doing business to really work in Nigeria, there's a need for it to be technology driven. Yes. And most of the MDAs, you just talked about the MDAs, most of them are still, largely analog driven and, a lot of paper trail and what have you. And of course, there is the issue of power supply to drive technology that will drive the ease of doing business.
Yeah, so as I've mentioned, it's always important to put it in context because a lot of other interventions and policies are going around power, around technology. But the automation, what we're trying to do in the ease of doing business, we call it in terms of almost like soft infrastructure because it's within, the economic recovery and growth plan of the federal government. And our mandate is basically about pushing Nigeria towards a globally competitive economy. So we focus on the soft infrastructure side, and there's a lot of automation going on that side. For instance, the CAC portal, as I mentioned, is directly connected to the joint tax portal such that you get your incorporation and you get a TIN number along with it. And if you knew the process before, you have to finish this and then go over to the tax authorities and then start that process all over again. So we're talking about synergies that are going on, and this is being backed, if you like, for some of these technology, even the private sector is supporting in that. For instance, the Main One company supported that building that infrastructure.
All right. Now, those are about doing business within Nigeria. How about a foreigner who wants to do business for the first time in Nigeria? Talk to us about what it would take and what's different and how he benefits from that.
Okay, so for the foreigner who wants to do business in Nigeria, again, we have agencies of government that deal with that. For instance, there's the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission. Interestingly, the Ease of Doing Business team sits on the 4th floor of the Investment Promotion Commission building. So there are a lot of synergies, a lot of interactions. We know that the NIPC issues alerts, goes on international roadshows, creating awareness across Nigeria's missions and all of that. So there's a lot of information out there. I mean, even on the NIPC portal, there's a news bulletin that goes out that creates awareness around the investment opportunities in each state. There's the one-stop investment center, and that also is replicated across all the 36 states and the FCT. So I think the information is out there. But if you speak specifically to the ease of doing business, one of the advantages of having this kind of profile is that when you think of an international investor, it's always a bird's eye view first. And perhaps one of the top 3 documents that any international investor will look at, I mean, from my experience in investment banking, they look at the Global Competitiveness Report by the World Economic Forum. They look at the Ease of Doing Business Report by the World Bank, and probably, the IMF projections, of, economic growth and outlook. So that's probably the first 3 filters that they use to look at any economy. Now, so when you see progress, in terms of Nigeria, that look, Nigeria has just moved unprecedentedly 24 places up. The World Bank recognizes you as one of the top 10 most improved economies in a particular year, just by a specific set of reforms that you've done. Then it creates a lot of interest. And
are you able to say that more foreigners are actually, coming to Nigeria because of ease of doing business?
Oh yes, the data is there. Again, from the National Bureau of Statistics, you find that just last year alone, about I think about $40 billion were announced in terms of projects across about 22 states. That data is available from National Bureau of Statistics. Just even investment capital inflows into Nigeria doubled between Q1 and Q2, comparing that to Q3 and Q3 in 2017. So we see that there's a lot of foreign investor interest. Immediately the economy peaked once the recession phased out, and we could see positive growth in Q2 and Q3 2017. Immediately that really popped out. The stock market rallied unprecedentedly, and it was actually one of the top performing indexes in the world. So those are the indices of international investor interest, and you can see it right there that the money is coming back.
The rating that is bringing this positive turnout is positive dimension is 2017. Looking at 2018, going into the what are the likely projections, and what should Nigerians and business owners be expecting this year when it comes to consolidating on the ease of doing business?
Thank you. That's so for us, we are basically we are not changing the winning team or the winning formula. We're basically consolidating on what we did in 2017. Again, and as we speak already, we are in an accelerator program, the National Action Plan 3.0. It's another 60-day intervention. And we're there working with MDAs, basically pushing specific reforms that we have prioritized as the most impactful for the business community in this season. We're also consolidating on our PEBEC report, which is basically...
What's that?
Yeah, so it's a feedback mechanism. It's a web-based feedback mechanism where we basically put the reporting and the feedback in the hands of the public. Now we tested it, in the last 2 months of 2017, November, December, and we're basically going full scale on it. So if you have a laptop right now or a phone, just type www.pebec.report. That's PEBEC.report, and what you find is a web-based application that has 8 ministries, 8 agencies of government there as our test, as our pilot test, that you can provide feedback. Positive feedback, negative feedback. And we're encouraging Nigerians to use it because this is the only way, we can get, actual feedback as to what reforms, are working out there and what are the pressure points.
Would like you to, of course, mention that website again before we're done with the show. And our stakeholders have called for the decentralization of the registration center for the trademark, which is presently in Abuja. That's that's still...
so for the trademark, yes. I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that was actually, working with them was a result of feedback that we got, like you said, from stakeholders. Okay. So in our reforms, we have an indicator called trading across borders, which basically looks at imports and exports. But then when having stakeholder engagements, people have mentioned to us that, look, it's equally pretty difficult to trade even within Nigeria. And so we coined an indicator, homegrown, separate from the World Bank, because it's really not about the World Bank indices, it's about impacting SMEs, right? So we coined an indicator, the trading within Nigeria indicator, and we've been working with 6 agencies since last year. Of course, the customs and the police, when you think about movement of goods across, we have the Trademark Agency and the Standards Organization of Nigeria, NAFDAC, and also the National Office, for Technology Acquisition, NOTAP. So all these 6 agencies, talk about, the movement of goods, the standardization and regulation of goods, and of course, intellectual property. So with the trademark registry, we've actually been gaining some traction. The backlog of patents that used to exist there that haven't been published in a while, things that have all been published, and we see people receiving that. So there's a lot of activity going on across this, and it's really to the credit of the feedback that we're getting, from the public. So we encourage them to give us more feedback.
Well, all right, coming up with the reform or this kind of policy, we know that for you to achieve this kind of success, that is getting ratings already, is not, it didn't just come overnight. Talk to us about some of the challenges generally. You talk about collaboration generally. This certainly cannot just be your agency just moving on alone.
Everything is hunky-dory.
Exactly. What kind of challenges do you face coming up with all of this?
Oh, not at all. I mean, the singular challenge that you face in reforming anything at all is the resistance to change. And that's the first thing. So in order to conquer that, it's important that you go top to bottom and then bottom up. And I'll explain what that means. The Enabling Business Environment Secretariat is actually the implementation arm of a council, the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council. And that council is chaired by His Excellency, the Vice President. He attends the meetings physically. And in that council, we have the heads of agencies, we have ministers that matter, virtually all the ministers of the cabinet there, the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Minister of Transport, the Honorable Minister of Power Works and Housing, the Chief Justice of Federation represented, the Attorney General, Budget and National Planning, and then we have representatives of the private sector also there. We have the heads of agencies that we work with. So we have the highest political buy-in right there at the top, such that when we are speaking to mid-level public servants, they know that their bosses have already keyed into this program. So it's to your own benefit, to align yourself. And then of course, so there's the there's incentivizing for great work that has been done. For instance, we had a public PEBEC Awards session at the end of last year where we celebrated the agencies, that had performed well. We have ranking systems where we measure the agencies, and nobody likes to be at the bottom. So where you see an agency at 0, immediately after that meeting, the head of the agency is calling his reform champion right in the agency and said, look, what happened? Which report didn't you send? Can you get it done in this month or in this quarter so that the next cycle we are moving up? So it's a mixture of, incentives and consequence management.
What about at the level of the state, the subnational level? I mean, how are they buying into this ease of doing business,
policy?
Interestingly, we are now, in NAP 3.0, and we started from last year. We've been working extensively with the state governments, the 36 states and the FCT. The Honorable Minister...
Are they falling over themselves to ensure that, the rankings improve in their states too?
Oh, yes, and I'll just speak to that very quickly. The background to that was that presentations have been made at the National Economic Council, which is where the governors sit, and the Governors Forum, to ensure that, look, they understand the context of why the business climate reforms should be cascaded to the subnational level. Then we've basically supported each state to replicate the national model. You have an EXCO, which gives you political buy-in. You have a project management office, like a state secretariat for ease of doing business. And with that, you have quarterly reports, monthly reports, and tracking that goes on. So we have been supporting in that. We also have stakeholder engagements in the states. For instance, we were in Kano last week, we were in Oyo just yesterday. We're here for the Lagos Kano Summit. Next week, we're in Gombe, we're in Aba, we're in for a Made in Nigeria Summit. So all the states are keen in, and the moment, you know, there's a competitive, healthy competition across the states. The moment they see that, you know, this state is doing very well in terms of that, the next state governor is calling you, when are you coming to my state? I need to set up this structure, you know, to get the ease of doing business climate better. So, and with all of that, we're consolidating that with a report. This is a business climate survey, which basically showcases what the states are doing. Because it's, I mean, it's good to have healthy competition, but the point is that every state has some strength or the other. Yeah. So we're interested in showing, you know, the regional clusters, the regional attractiveness, the individual states' attractiveness, just beyond just ranking and saying this state is over
about their
this.
comparative
advantage. Exactly.
Now, you've mentioned the National Action Plan 3.0 several times. Can you break it down for us? Because on what is the National Action Plan, and then why 3.0?
Okay, so 3.0 is, I mean, that's actually to bring it closer to, I mean, it catches on when you say NAP 3.0. Okay. All right, so, but it's the third National Action Plan. We've had two. And each National Action Plan has basically been a 60-day accelerated intervention. And it's really accelerated because it's speed. I mean, there's so much, like I mentioned, the amount of states we've been in. We're pushing, we're actively on the road, trying to get reforms done. But in the NAP 3.0, we're focusing on 9 indicators that we have prioritized as the most impactful for business in this season. What would be the major ones? The major one is trading across borders, which is basically import and export, and probably in 2 words, they are papa pots. But it's really about it's really about the
ports. I wonder how you're going to work around.
It's really about the port system. So while we focus on the soft infrastructure side of that, there are a lot of other interventions, you know, to traffic management and all of that. But ours is basically to focus on the processing there, making sure that there's a single, you know, examination interface, you know, that goes on within the port, manned, you know, directly through the customs, while all the other agencies basically align to what, you know, to the examination procedures that have been done.
It's even interesting you talk about these agencies, and I'm just wondering, I mean, you have NAFDAC, so many of them, SON that you mentioned, customs and what have you. Are they really working in tandem? Do they understand that it's a new day? Government wants ease of business climate to improve even much further than, you know, what we have presently. Yes. That you don't have a situation where they are working against the interest of the other.
I believe they do, and I will say that because at
is
this
it reflecting?
It is, and it's about enforcement. So that's what we're doing. We're increasingly enforcing that. At these meetings, we have the Controller General of Customs beside the Controller General of Immigration. We have the Director General of NAFDAC. So these people are in the room, and they're basically cascading this information or these reforms, you know, to their, you know, mid-levels, to the implementation officers on the ground. And we're also interacting with them. So the aim here is really to make sure that, for instance, just in February, well, earlier this month, there was the palletization policy that came out, which basically explains that, look, before now, people bring in cargo and it's all, you know, scrambled in the cargo, and, you know, because of that, you know, there now becomes opportunities for rent seeking, where you say we need to bring out everything to physically examine. But the palletization policy basically says, look, if there is a specific way of packaging your products by the original manufacturer, then adhere to that. If that doesn't exist, then it's important that you palletize. That means you put them, you know, in sizable containers. You know what the pallet boxes are. It's basically those things that you end up using, putting your deep freezers.
Yes.
So that makes it easier.
Exactly.
Right. That makes it easier to understand. So just making sure that you stack it in the right way so that it's easy, you know, to examine. And of course, we are moving away from that. Like I said, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Into actually deploying, you know, the right technology and the right equipment, scanners, you know, such that, you know, a lot of these processes are automated, and make sure that, you know, the passage of goods through the ports, do you understand, is as seamless as possible.
All right, a lot of work from everything the picture you've painted now. It seems like there's so much work going on.
There is, I must
tell you. I'm so excited. I want to
all
start
of this.
A business right
Oh,
now.
you want to start a business?
But I'm already in business.
Make us understand. Do you have a target where you know, okay, at the end of the next 3 months or at the end of 2018, this is our target, and this is what we want to achieve. Do you have that picture so that people can really look forward to it and then work towards it too?
Yes, we have that picture, and I'll tell you, right from last year, we had that picture when the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council was set up in 2016.
Share the picture with us.
Mr. President said, look, you need to move up 20 places, you know, in the Ease of Doing Business Index, because the World Bank methodology is pretty standard. and it's measured across 190 countries. So instead of creating a new methodology and then take time, and let's look at this. So this one works fine. It's not about the World Bank rankings, but it's a starting point, and it's a good measure, and it's a means to an end. So we adopted that, and Mr. President gave us a target of 20 places up. In 2017, we actually moved 24 places up. So His Excellency the Vice President at some point also was quoted saying, Mr. President had asked him, so how many more places are we moving this year? So in terms of the plan, the idea is to get to a top 100 position by the year 2020. So that's the picture, and that is the ranking. That is for the ranking.
Yes.
When it comes to the grassroots, when it comes to the SMEs, how many SMEs do you intend to bring on board? How many, when it comes to the GDP and all of that, do you have, because when it comes to ease of doing business, as more businesses are coming, GDP is rising and all of that. So talk to us about the figures there apart from the rankings. Okay, so those numbers, so again, the ease of doing business reforms is situated right within the economic recovery and growth plan. So we are fully aligned with the targets and objectives of the ERGP. Single-digit inflation, faster growth in GDP, in order to become, a top-ranking economy by the year 2020. So that's it. So in terms of while we look at the soft infrastructure, while we align with the targets of the ERGP, the reforms that we're pushing are basically pushing us towards, if you like, the objectives of the ERGP. For instance, the short-term objective of the ERGP was to get us immediately out of a recession and put us on a path of sustainable economic growth. We're happy to say that, with the different pockets of interventions going on, collectively, we have moved out of a recession, and we are now on a path of sustainable growth. The MBS numbers coming out shortly, will show that. And so that's the path in which we're going.
Well, tell us more about these reforms, especially the one for 2018 to facilitate ease of doing business.
Okay, so again, just to continue on that, so we talked about the PEBEC report, which is basically to tell us, giving the public the right to give us feedback and understand what's going on there. We've talked about the third National Action Plan. We've talked about also the subnational initiative, which basically is going into the states and making sure that, it's not just federal agencies that we're looking at, but even the states have replicas of these agencies that need to, ease up in terms of, efficiency, time, cost, and procedure of interacting.
Okay, we do understand that, but we heard that the British government is actually in on this, saying they're going to be supporting Nigeria. The Deputy British High Commissioner, said recently that they would do all they can to support Nigeria. How valuable will that support be, and in what areas?
Well, we can do with all the support, that we can get. Donor agencies. There's a lot of collaboration across board, support even from different arms of government, and also, I mean, the greatest support we can get is in making sure, so that the collaboration remains. Collaborating with the National Assembly, with the judiciary, making sure that the state governments, are on board, and that's the level. So it's in fact, it's a nationwide collaboration. Stakeholder engagements where we actually engage with the public, whether it's in focus groups or in larger town hall meetings, and just communicating our reforms and making sure that the average Nigerian out there and the average business out there knows about what's going on, and can take benefit from that in terms of doing
what about the legal
easier.
framework to actually empower these reforms that government has in mind?
For the legal framework, and that's why the collaboration with the National Assembly is very important. But also from the private sector point of view, we are working with the section of business law of the Nigerian Bar Association. We're working with the National Assembly Business Economic Roundtable, working with the NESG, civil society, to make sure that the legal framework, in getting these reforms on board, exists. For instance, we're working on an omnibus bill, which basically is to take out legal irritants, that have been in business law since even colonial days, and just to make sure that our business law speaks more, to the modern day form of doing business. And so there are a lot of things in there, revising the Company and Allied Matters Act, tax harmonization, and several areas they are looking at, which of these laws, do no longer reflect
the realities
of
relevant
business in the 21st
century. The modern day. Now, you talked about the PEBEC report.
Yes.
Is it specifically meant to get feedbacks? Is that what the PEBEC report is all about?
Yeah, so we call it, it's a feedback mechanism.
Okay.
And the reason for that is we feel that is where the public really can help us.
Okay.
Because while we do these reforms, sometimes you may not be able to gauge the pressure points as you would. So what the public feedback does is that it creates, a dashboard where you can immediately see, okay, so this is the pressure point here, this is the pressure point here.
So what's the response?
What are you getting? Yes,
so already, just in testing between November and December, we've gotten a lot of issues around, of course, bribery, corruption, delay in approvals, or outright.
What about multiple taxation?
So multiple taxation is not, if you like, is not situated within this, because it's we have an indicator called paying taxes. But what that does is just about the efficiency of of getting the taxes out. So for instance, CIT or company income tax audits, making sure that automation, you can file your taxes at any FIRS office, you can do it online, and just limiting the human interface. Okay. But when it comes to multiple taxation, I think that most of those issues are situated within the states, and more often we are interacting with those states to see that, in their own purview, paying taxes is an easier thing to do.
All right, give us that website again, the PEBEC
so it's
one.
PEBEC.report. It's PEBEC.
PEBEC.report.
Yes.
Okay, so anyone can, get into that portal from anywhere in the world. PEBEC.report.
Yes.
To follow the ease of doing business and all of those indices and
get all the
figures.
Information.
Yes. So right now we have 8 agencies on that portal: NAFDAC, Customs, the police, I believe the SON, and a few others. So we have 8 agencies on that report, and those agencies, you can actually click on them and give a report, whether positive or negative, on what is going on. We also ask for evidence, so you have the opportunity to upload, a picture or a video or a scanned document of what, because it's important that, whatever you are reporting has to be backed by evidence. So it's not about just venting. It's not about venting. It's really about, evidence-based reports that we can follow up, because the agencies actually have a 72-hour timeline to make an initial response to you in terms of resolving your issues. So you raise a ticket, we follow up the ticket with the affected agency, because they have counterparts, reform champions within that.
All right. Akin Olusoji Akinyele, technical partner. Well, let's just say you've come to enlighten us on the ease of doing business.
Yeah, exactly. From the Office of Ease of Doing Business,
yes,
Technical Assistant, Industry, Trade and Investment.
Thank
and the
you.
website is very important. www.pebec.report. With that, you can, get into the portal and get all the information you want to get, and so on.
Thank you so much for, I believe Nigerians they are better educated now.